Oh, I know. Well, even Faith's mom, Catherine, or his grandpa was always, she said he always thought he was dying. It's just like every year he'd say, by next spring I'll be dead. But she said he never was until he was.
One of his famous sayings was, well, hell, that's as long as, it'll probably last as long as I do if I die when I oughta. We were talking about Uncle Reed used to dynamite the river for fish. And he would, when the suckers were around in the spring was a good time to do it. And he would have his son Buddy and I and my brothers go downstream, because when he dynamited the bridge, or dynamited the river, the suckers would come to the top, float down the river. He'd have us jump in and throw the fish out onto the bank. One guy would go out by the bridge with a stone, and when there were no cars coming, so it was safe to dynamite that, they would hit that old steel bridge with a stone 2 or 3 times, and it would echo down the river, and that's when Reed would throw the dynamite in. It was always done early in the morning. The funny part was they had a little picnic area down there called Jones's Landing. And old Reed blew that one Sunday morning before the picnickers showed up.
He blew it up?
He blew the river and got some fish.
Oh.
He dynamite. Yeah. They called him the Indian. One of the stories about the Indian was that he was a poacher, and that's when I first ate venison at his house. Well, anyway, I was telling you about this guy that lived a mile over. Mm-hmm. He said, hell, I grew up on venison. And I said, oh, you were poachers too. And his wife said, you know, Neil, there's that word you don't like. One of Reed's deals was that if he went out at night shining deer, he'd take his car and he'd take Sadie and Buddy with him. And so he was showing the shining deer for the kid, showing him the deer. Well, he went up about a mile west of where he lived, and he was in the woods all the time, so he knew where the deer were. And so there was a little field, like 2 or 3 acres of clover up there. So he's up there driving around the car, shining deer, and the sheriff shows up. So he has Sadie throw the rifle out the window. And so the sheriff stopped him, but there wasn't any gun. And old Ridge's story was he was just down showing the deer to the kid. And the old sheriff said, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to wait here in daylight, and we're going to find that rifle. And Reed told this story himself. So he came back home and dropped off, parked the car, and Sadie and Buddy went in the house. And he went up through the brush, and the sheriff was waiting in the driveway. He crawled on his hands and knees around that hayfield, found that rifle before daylight. He said when the sheriff went in the morning, the hayfield was all wallered down where he crawled around on his hands and knees, but there was no rifle. I knew how angry he could get. One time when he was living in Ithaca, I was down there, South Ithaca and Pompeii, and they were going to thrash something. and went into town to buy something, get some bags, I don't know what the hell. And he had an old Whippet car, and he was low on gas. So he pulled into a gas station, and the guy just didn't come out. He said, I guess these goddamn leatherheads don't want to sell any gas, and then down the road again. We stopped at 3 gas stations, and he drove off and never got any gas. His favorite saying, goddamn leatherhead.
So he called everybody that.
Yeah.
What's
He did.
a leatherhead?
Guy and his head's made out of leather. He can't get anything into it. He had 2 Western horses at that time, Barney and Bill, and they were branded horses, mean. And so he had this pair, and they were, oh God, they were mean. We always watched horses so that if you worked them hard and they came in all lathered up, you didn't let them drink very much water because they would flounder themselves. And so Dad would be angry at those old Mustangs. He'd turn them loose the water tank. They'd go out the water tank, put their mouth in, fill it up with water, rinse their mouth out and spit it out, and do that 2 or 3 times and go to the barn. They wouldn't drink. But the domestic horses, you couldn't let them do that. But that was an innate thing with Western horses. They never drank water when they're sweaty. Oh God, they were mean.